Okay, welcome back everybody to the 86th episode of the My Generation podcast. On today's episode of the show, we're going to be speaking with Ade Lewis. He is a critically acclaimed singer and songwriter based in Kent in the UK, deeply rooted in the richness of words, love, truth, and hope. In this music creating process episode, we're going to be going through Ade's inspirations, what got him into music, his journey, and where he is going next, like we do with a few of the other music creating episodes we've had here on the My Generation podcast. You can go to our YouTube if you want to look at a playlist full of all of the different musical artists we've had on the show as well. And if you're watching along on YouTube, you'll be able to see timestamps all across the screen to different parts of the podcast if there is an area of Ade's story that interests you specifically. And as always on the My Generation podcast, every single Thursday, we have our weekly features of Sammy Bacon's album reviews, Harry Monday's film reviews, Emma Cusson brings us one of her poems from her personal collection, Joe brings us one of his video game reviews, and Tom Axtell does another one of his crazy wildcard pirate facts and profiles. So you'll be able to hear a story of old from Tom towards the end of the show. All that great stuff to come. But firstly, we're going to go to Ade. And Ade has released 2 albums. The debut album, Empathy and Ecstasy. It tells a story of life's experiences that are blissfully and at times painfully relatable. And his latest project, Be You, is out now. Links will all be down in the description to Be You, so you can listen to all his new stuff by going to his website. It'll be the top link in the description. It's a 10-track album. It's sure to please your ears. It's got a very retro and modern mix to it as well, with a mix of instruments. Ade's lyrics throughout, they're extremely raw, and that's something I noticed from listening to a lot of his music, so I'm going to ask him a lot about his lyrical inspiration. But firstly, welcome to the show, Ade.
Hey, thank you so much for inviting me on it. It's a pleasure to be involved in this.
Thank you very much for coming on, Ade. It's a pleasure to have you on. The pleasure's all mine. In today's episode, like you know, with every music creating episode, we try to get behind the scenes of what it's like being a musician, getting into the head of different genres. And Ade, I usually love to start with, where did your love and passion for music first come from?
Mine was actually weirdly quite late on. It wasn't something that was, I guess, I was born into. Mine was probably about 15 years old. And it was the first time my dad said, you're going to have to stop listening to the kind of music I was listening to and come to Glastonbury. Once I went there, that opened up my eyes to a lot of things, but mainly just different types of music on all spectrums, and all kinds of people were it just brought everybody together. That was the main thing that took my striking to music.
And when obviously going to Glastonbury, that's a massive event. You're going to be seeing loads of names. Who were some of your biggest inspirations then when you were there?
Well, to be honest, as I said, I mean, I actually did not know a lot of the bands. My music growing up was very, it was grime related, hip hop related, I guess, chart stuff. And when I went to Glastonbury, the first band that took me were, it was Mumford & Sons, just before they'd got, I guess, blew up. And it was only really Little Lion Man that was out, that people knew. And I went to see them. I was just like, this is something special here.
And what was it about their sort of style of music then that sort of drew you? What was so specific to this that you maybe hadn't got from the music that you listened to growing up?
I guess just how much fun they were having. Also putting such a positive message across through music, whilst, you know, just being with 4 guys, acoustic instruments on stage, and just singing their songs and having fun with it. It was quite a contagious feeling to watch.
And I couldn't agree more that kind of echoes in Empathy and Ecstasy. Listening through, it's a very it's a calm and relaxing experiential listen. Is a lot of the stories that have come up in throughout the album and the sort of messages you're conveying, are they from sort of personal life experiences?
Yeah, I would always say every song is always personal, and something that I guess it's a form of expressing myself in perhaps a way that I can't often in day-to-day life. It's somewhere you can lock behind a door and just kind of get everything out. And, you know, it's so incredible when people can relate to that. And, you know, when you've been in an unusual place and it's gone into music, that's the most powerful thing, the relation and the conversations and the people that you meet along the way of it.
And it's always very interesting to me when, you sit down to write an album.
Yeah.
What comes first? Like, we've had so many people on this show talk about how, it starts with just a riff or it starts from a memory. And I wanted to know from you, with the writing of this album, like you said, so much of it coming from your personal experience, where do you usually begin a song? Does it start from your personal experience, or does it start from you just getting a melody in your head, or is it sometimes a mix of both?
I guess it can be everything, but to scale down on the question, I mean, it always comes from, I travelled for 5 years on and off. So living in different countries and experienced all of those things, I was just observing. And I think that's where the first inspiration comes from. There's something that will just hit you or touch you. It could be a moment, something sad, something happy. And I guess it just kind of forms a reaction or a triggered memory in your brain, or a feeling that feels familiar. And it's a case of nailing that and putting that into the song. But I would always say that lyrics come first as opposed to melodies and stuff. It can work both ways, but it's predominantly lyrics for me.
And I found it great what you said there, just about the connections you've made from traveling and just watching the world.
Yeah,
What's quite interesting about that is you said earlier about how communication and meeting people is something that's clearly quite important in your life. And I know that there's such a strong music creating community in Kent. We've got, the Kent Musicians Notice Board on Facebook for Kent. You've got so many places to meet people. There might be musicians listening to this, Aid, who want to know how to connect and meet with other artists. Has there been a way that you found really soothing and wonderful for you to connect with other artists as you go on your journey?
I mean, for me personally, I mean, when I first started, it was just, it was open mic, open mic, open mic, open mic. Can I potentially get a gig out of this? Excellent. And just building it up that way. I mean, don't get me wrong, there is some incredible platforms for social media. I'm just much more of a face value person. Um, it's just a lot more personable for me to experience meeting people in real life than it is on social media. But there's incredible forums, and as you said, on pages and stuff like that, where you can literally cater your every needs to what you're looking for and find it with other people, which is incredible.
And you're clearly such, as you said, a physical person. You like to be there in person doing the work. And obviously lockdown has sort of hit two of the biggest things for you, those in-person performances and the travel that's clearly such a massive part of your life. How over
Yeah.
the sort of period of lockdown did you sort of keep positive? Because obviously you've released Be You and all your music comes with that such positive message. How did you keep all that going through lockdown?
I think I'd be speaking, not only on behalf of myself but everybody. That it's been a complete up and down. To say it's been a smooth running, I don't think that's ever accurate. But for us personally, just being in touch with the other band members as well, and seeing how they were getting on. A lot of them, this is our full-time profession. This is how we earn money. So to have no gigs, that's it. That's income done. So a lot of us took on jobs and stuff, and I just thought, for everybody's well-being, and we've got some fantastic songs there. We haven't really had the full chance to give them a go because we've been touring and gigging and whatnot, and that was a perfect opportunity to bring everybody together and get that album done. And I think it's just got that feeling of how we were. It's very chilled out. We were just grateful to be able to pick up an instrument with other people and play, and I think that's really kind of hit off and rubbed off on the album and the feel of it.
And obviously, live music is now gradually coming back into our lives. And, with venues being able to do sort of outdoor performances, have you and the band been now sort of re-engaging in that as the live music scene sort of starts to open up?
Yeah, I mean, we've done very limited events due to obviously the size of our band in general. We're a six-piece, so I mean that is technically illegal with new guidelines now. But for us, we've done a couple of festivals, which was just, once again, we were just grateful to be able to play. There's still uncertainty amongst everybody. And we've done a few stripped back solo stuff, but, we've been trying to get the album launched together, but we've just put that on hold because, the main thing for us is to bring people together, not separate them apart. So if that means that we have to wait a little while, then, so be it.
And obviously, in relation to government rules, we're recording this episode as of the 16th of September, 2020. So you've got the context whenever you're listening, whether it's 5 months from now or 20 years, as to what the government guidelines are with, with 6 people. But obviously, when we're in lockdown and when we're unable to, go out and experience the music as much, it brings back that sense of nostalgia, and we can revisit old memories. So, in a moment, I'm going to be asking Aid what's been his favourite live performance that him and the band have done. But before we do that, we're going to be going to Sammy Bacon and Harry Monday. So if you're ready to hear Aid's story about that, come back in just a moment. We've got these brilliant weekly features here on the My Generation podcast. They've been going since March with Sammy. Every single week, he has shared an album review. And here is the album that Sammy would love to share with you all this week.
Hello, everyone. Hope you're doing well. This week, After the Gold Rush by Neil Young. This is just a classic folk and country album. It's one of my favourite albums of all time. If you don't know Neil Young is a singer, songwriter, legend from Canada. And After the Gold Rush is just a beautiful album. It opens with Tell Me Why. So it opens with. Then it goes into the song After the Gold Rush, which is this beautiful piano-led track that is just one of the most beautiful songs of all time. It has rockier songs on there too, like Southern Man and Don't Let It Bring You Down. And then, it's become one of those albums where each time I listen to it, I have a new favourite track. I'm kind of... Till the Morning Comes is also a beautiful song. Tell Me, Only Love Can Break Your Heart is a bit of a soppy, cliche song, but it's also just great at the same time. And the whole album's just brilliant. Neil Young is amazing. Listen to this. Listen to Tonight's the Night, and listen to Harvest. Yeah, Neil Young, man, forever. After the Gold Rush. Bye.
Thank you for that, Sammy. And once again, we'll tune in with Sammy once again next week for his next album review. If you've got an album you would love Sammy to listen to, please let us know in the comments, and hopefully he'll be able to review it sometime later on in the show. Please get all your thoughts in. And if you've heard any of the albums that Sammy's recommended, once again, put that in the comments. We'd love to hear whether you're listening on YouTube, Soundcloud, or on Spotify. And now, before we go back to Aid to ask him about his favourite live performance he's done with his band, we're going to be going to Harry Monday. Every single week, he's a film student in Canterbury. He brings us a film review. And here is the film Harry would love to share with you all this week.
This week's film recommendation is probably one you've already heard of. And just to get out of the gate, is the Netflix original Extraction. Now, we live in a sort of age where the action movies are coming into a new renaissance after the John Wick series of movies. It's just redefined how to do action in movies. And Extraction is the next step towards that new age, where John Wick decided to add more flashy lights and a more neon synth background element to it to make it a bit more stylized. Extraction just removes that and brings it back to the action and brings it back to the gunfight. It's just a simple story of an Afghan soldier rescuing an Indian child in the middle of what is a war zone, essentially. And to still even have an ending to what this day that I find dramatic and I still shed a tear to is immense. So this week's film recommendation is Extraction.
And thank you for that, Harry. Once again, tuning with Harry next week to find out what his next film review is. Every week, Harry obviously brings in a plethora of different films, from art house, indie cinema to mainstream as well. So you're getting an eclectic mix every Thursday. Now, stay tuned later on in the show for 3 of our other weekly features. We have Emma Cusson's poetry readings, Joe Finnegan's video game reviews, and Tom Axtell's pirate profiles. But we're going straight back to Aid now. And Aid, the question I alluded to before we went to Sammy, what do you think for you has been your favourite live performance you've done with the band, and what was it about that day that was so special?
I would say it was our Pizza Express gig at Maidstone in the live room. We've done quite a few there, and unfortunately it's closed down. But it was one of those venues that everybody just came together. It just had that perfect, intimate, candlelit vibe. And yeah, everyone was just happy to kind of be there. But that was our favourite one.
Absolutely. I think that it really suits your band's style, because listening to the song, if I close my eyes, I kind of get that candlelight vibe going on in my head when I listen to your music. And I'm sure if you guys go, as I said at the start of this, first link in the description, you can go to Aid's website and find the music for his band, and you'll probably get that same feeling. Is that sort of, again, going back to how you write your songs, is feeling something that's quite essential to you in your process?
It's such a weird thing. I mean, as we kind of discussed earlier, it's just something that triggers. You can never predict it. You know, I know everybody has their different things, but I don't really force anything with my songs. Hence why there's been quite a large gap between the albums. It just comes when it comes. I quite like, you know, I'm creating something that's already there. It's just putting the pieces together. Yeah, it's quite. I've evaded that question quite cleverly there.
Yeah,
I don't think I was that direct.
no, it's all good. Well, it's a tough question to describe feelings sometimes.
Very tough. Yeah, you're
Yeah.
doing your job greatly.
We ask the tough questions here on the show. Obviously you've got two albums, and you mentioned there that there was a large gap between them. So I would love to sort of know what sort of strides or differences that have changed from, you know, Empathy and Ecstasy that have gone into BU. What have been some of the key evolutions you've made as an artist?
I guess inspiration. I mean, yeah, I'm 27 years old, and that, you know, to some people, especially a lot of the people who come and support our shows, you know, I'm still technically seen as a baby. So it's the 5 years I spent traveling were kind of the courage and confidence I needed to, I guess it was a vulnerability to put everything out into a song. And I guess that strength grew into the BU, but it was just inspiration. Last, well, a few years ago, the album was released. I was slowly coming out of a relationship, whereas this album, I've been in a relationship, we've traveled, we've had experience, I've had some incredible opportunities with music that I've pursued. So it's been that inspiration, which it takes a long time to, when you're aiming for something, you kind of just go. There's not a whole bunch of time to actually sit back and observe. I had that with the traveling, but I haven't had that for a while. It's kind of been music for the last 3 years. And with all that, I guess it's just maturing, finding a sound, and it's still testing the waters with, you know, what other people like, as well as not just what we're creating, because they're the ones who fill the seats up, and, you know, they up the streams and support everything else. So it's kind of a communal, it feels like a family almost.
Yeah, and what's so interesting about that is you're almost getting you at two different points of your life with, like you said about, you know, coming out of a relationship and all this travel and how it's changed you. It's like a time stamp of this is where you were and this is where you are now. I'd be very interested to know where you traveled actually to get all this inspiration for the new album.
Yeah, sure. So I've been to Vietnam 3 times, Thailand, we've done Cambodia. I lived in Australia for just under a year. Kuala Lumpur, we were there, Bali. It was kind of mainly around Southeast Asia with the people I met along the way. I lived with in Australia. I've been there 3 or 4, 5 times now. Kind of done a camper van trip up the East Coast, which was amazing. And that's where my time is, to soak in what's happened. So that's where I guess all the songs and everything kind of, I guess that they morph their foundations, and it's only until they come back into the studio where they find their true feet.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more about the passion behind, you know, camper van travel as well. Me and my family, we used to have a 73 Westphalia that we used to take all over the place, and they are beautiful things. So if anyone's listening is interested in buying a camper van, go do it, because they will be the best time of your life. I mean, what drew you to Southeast Asia then? Was it the, you know, the culture, or just finding a completely different place to your experience?
I think it was when I was 16. I trained as a chef, and that became a full-time career pretty quickly. So I guess I kind of skipped the whole going out partying on the weekends. The friends, oh, do you want to come out? Do you want to come out? And just constantly saying no. It forces this whole thing of where people withdraw from you because they feel that you're not interested. Not that it's just I started early with work, you know. And by the time I was 20, I'd worked every weekend, Christmas, New Year. And I just from that moment, I was like, you know what, there's more, there has to be something more to it than this. Because, you know, I've got all this money, this is great, but what do I do with it? And that's just what drew me to Vietnam. I wanted to go somewhere on my own and throw myself out of a comfort zone. I didn't realize how much of a comfort zone I was throwing myself out of. You know, living here in Kent, I live in the middle of nowhere. We're surrounded by fields. And to go in the middle of Vietnam, I don't think I actually spoke for 2 days. I was just watching and trying to work out how to cross the road with 20 million motorcycles coming towards you.
It's so interesting that, yeah, because as a man who has never lived outside of Kent, when I have friends from university coming in from all over the world, you do get a little slice of somewhere completely different. And I mean, it's interesting you said about solo traveling, because one of the first episodes we did of the show, I mean, this is episode 86. I'm throwing it back to like episode 10 or episode 9. We had Mike Hugh on the show, and he talked about solo traveling for that whole episode. So if this is a part of Aid's story you're interested in, you'll love that entire episode with Mike. And for him, he talked about couch surfing and what importance that had for him. But what did you, because you were taking a more observational approach, what was some of the key things that you did to make solo traveling an enjoyable experience?
Honestly, I think it was just being absolutely overwhelmed with the fact that everything we were taught, how to eat, how to speak, how to, I guess, have manners, just everything that you kind of brought up with, you know, in a normal Kent family. And then to go somewhere where, okay, the language doesn't work here, okay, the manners don't work here, and everything's backwards. I was fascinated with culture, not only with the food, with the culture, and I just wanted to observe. I just wanted to watch. I was so intrigued with how, I guess, that they were living, and that, you know, I guess the general observation I took from all of my years of traveling is people are just doing things for their family. They just want to have food on their table and a roof over their head. It doesn't matter what kind of background you come from. That's the main thing that we all have in common. And I was just very humbled by all of my experiences in being in poverty, places where there was no electricity. We broke down in the middle of the mountain about 3 o'clock in the morning. We thought we were being murdered, but they were actually just giving us a roof over our head so we could sleep until the morning, until it was light. And we woke up and they were fixing our bikes in the morning. And I was like, these guys, you know, hardly had any electricity, no money. There was nothing there, but they give us all of this. How can I go back home and get angry when I'm sat in traffic? It's a weird complex, but also a humbling experience.
Wow. Well, I mean, hey, this feels like a podcast topic in of itself. That's it's incredibly humbling to hear all that as well, because that perspective has got to have made its way into the album. So when you're listening to Be You, please, guys, it's interesting to bear this in mind. This is where a lot of the album came from. And yeah, for me, that perspective, if living in Kent my entire life and not going outside of it beyond holidays in summer, it's, you know, you do get into a bubble of where you live. And I find that very fascinating that you took such a long break. And how long did you travel for? It was about 5 years, did you say?
It was 5 years on and off. The longest I was away was nearly a year, and that was when I moved to Melbourne in Australia.
And did along any of these travels, did you get to share your music with locals as well?
Yeah, once again, it was so bizarre. I was so obsessed with just observing. It wasn't music had just kind of started, but it wasn't something that really came into conversation. But in Australia, I had a good couple of shows out there. Towards the end of the, I've been there 5 times. Sorry, so the last time we were out there was a couple of gigs that came up, which was great to play. But that was it really. It's just always been about it's quite nice to kind of switch off a little bit. If it comes up in conversation, of course, you go back into the, right, okay, I need to promote myself here. This is an opportunity. But at the end of the day, it's just so nice to kind of, people take you for face value. They have no idea what you do. And it's just great to see where those conversations and also friendships can lead.
Amazing. And just the last traveller question I'm going to ask before we move into our next 3 features. I mean, like with the episode that we had with Mike, many moons ago, one of the key questions I think listeners who maybe are interested in solo traveling have what are the things to look out for, because solo traveling can be quite a daunting thing. Is there maybe 1 or 2 key lessons that you picked up from solo traveling that you wish you knew before you'd set off?
Yeah. The first one is, once you book it, that's the easy part. Once you get to the airport, you'll be filled with fear, dread, and all these things, but you have to ride it out, because that is just a part of your brain which is set up to protect you. But every single person I spoke to who I met the first time round all said that we felt sick and we were scared at the airport. But the fact that we followed that through and just continued to face fears, I think opened up so many opportunities and just great friendships and just, memories that I guess will be with me for life,
Beautiful. Well, yeah, if you're listening, I mean, we were talking about music creating process, but if you're interested in solo traveling, Aid is
we
the
can
man
mix
for
it
you.
up.
Yeah, we love a wild tangent on the show. Always, always. Now, we're going to go back to Aid in just a moment as we start to wrap up the show. What I want to move into next is the sort of next objectives for the band, both short term and long term, where he's going next, so you can keep following along with this journey and what Aid plans to do with the 6-piece band going forward. But before we do so, every week on the show, we have the 3 newest additions. These new features have only been with us for about a month and a half now, so they're still relatively new on the show. So please do let us know in the comments what you think of all the brand new features we have here on the podcast. And someone else who comes to us with very calm, relaxed, experiential vibes on the show is Emma Cusson. Every single week she brings us a poem from her personal collection, and here is the poem that Emma would love to share with you all this week.
Dust. It paves these streets and it evolves into molecules in the air. It collects in the cracks between us that we couldn't reach to clean away, and now it's just too much to bear. I said I needed to leave to start my life over. 6,075 miles just because I couldn't stand your stupid smile anymore. I can slightly remember the smell of your hands as they waltzed across my body, and now the memory just feels like a steering wheel crushing my bones. 6,075 miles. Canterbury to Chennai, I would get high. Chennai to Madurai, I slowly forgot your goodbye. Madurai to Dindigul. Scrap that. What does it matter where I am? But for the record, I was studying in Gandigram. I wasn't thinking about you. Such as my pale skin stuck out amongst the high melanin crowds, I was out of place, yet I felt embrace. I wasn't thinking about you. Colourful houses stuck out amongst the desolate flat plains. We were one of the same and it was stranger than earth, but still, I wasn't thinking about you. The only reasons you spoke was the state that you're mine, and this divine design you had in your mind about us being entwined was lost in the noise. You was perfectly poised and sure of yourself, but I bottled it all up and stored it away on our mantelpiece, 6,075 miles away. We're not breathing the same air, but I knew you cared. I said, we're not breathing the same air, but at least I tried, and even throughout my doubt you wouldn't leave my side, and now you're the only thing I bet on I'd lose before my mind.
And thank you for that, Emma. Thank you for sharing a poem from your collection with us. Emma is a poet in the Thanet in Canterbury area. She's performed at Bramley's in Canterbury as well. And very excited to share even more stuff. You can find her at Autumn Bones on Instagram to see some of her photography mixed with the written words of some of her poems. We feature a large selection here, but she's got even more over on her Instagram too. Next, moving on to Joe Finnegan. Every week, Joe brings us video game reviews reviews from all the consoles, everything you can imagine, from retro, modern, PC games as well, ones that go on everything, any game under the sun, Joe will try and review. So here is the game that Joe would love to recommend for you all this week.
Hello, Joe here, and for the next 3 episodes I thought I'd do something different with my recommendations. Normally I try and recommend games that are available on most consoles, but I thought I'd try and choose games that are exclusive to each console this time around, so 1 game each from the Nintendo Switch, PS4 and Xbox One. This episode my select game is from the Nintendo Switch, and it is Mario and Rabbids. This may be one of the lesser known Mario titles, with Super Mario Odyssey the latest main title available on the Switch, but I did have a lot of fun with this one. It's a turn-based strategy game in which you control a team made up of all the classic Mario characters such as Mario, Luigi, Princess Peach, mixed in with characters from the Raving Rabbids series. You take turns in combat against classic Mario and Rabbids enemies with weapons such as missile launchers or melee weapons like hammers. The game features dynamic level design and a grid-based system, so it allows you to tactically pick apart your opponent. For instance, you could flank your opponent on one side of the map or climb onto the roof of a building to get a vantage point. It's very different to any other Mario game you'll have ever played, but I appreciated the attempt at making something different out of the Mario franchise. Mario and Rabbids currently available at Game from £20. Back over to you, Max.
And thank you for that, Joe. Once again, we will tune in with Joe next week for his next video game review. Joe also streams on Twitch at That's So Joe. Please go over there and follow his streams if you're fascinated about the world of video games. He plays a plethora of different games. He's never sticking to one consistently, so there's always something different to experience there. So like his review here on the show, always something new every week with Joe over on his stream. Go and check it out on Twitch. And our last weekly feature here on the show before we jump back into the chat with Aid and wrap up this week's episode of the show, it's Tom Axtell's Pirate Facts and Profiles. It's the wild card of the My Generation podcast. Every week, Tom Axtell, a history student in Canterbury, brings us a pirate story of old. And here is the pirate that Tom's story would love to share with you all this week.
Hello and welcome to Tom's Prolific Pirate Profiles. Today we are talking about Thomas II. Thomas II arrived in Bermuda in 1692. Without much information about his youth, II probably had a wealthy family in Rhode Island. He served as a privateer on English ships and was soon made the captain of a ship called the Amity Venture. With permission from the governor of Bermuda, Thomas received permission to attack French ships and colonies along the African coast. Alongside Captain George Drew, he was meant to join the Royal Africa Company. However, after a storm damaged Drew's ship, II decided to turn to piracy. It was easy enough to persuade his crew, as the original plan didn't pay well and was also extremely risky. With a course set for the Red Sea, II encountered a great Indian ship, which contained over 300 soldiers. II and his crew decided to attack, and after only a short battle, II emerged victorious, and each crew member received a share of over £3,000. Discovering from those captured that the ship was part of a convoy, II wanted to attack further. Most of the crew disagreed, and so they sailed to Madagascar. Soon after this, II travelled back to Rhode Island and managed to obtain a pardon. After a while though, he grew bored and thought that the call to the sea was too great to resist, and he took command of a new ship and sailed towards the Red Sea. In 1695, II attacked a ship belonging to the Great Mogul. This was not as successful as the last battle, with II being mortally wounded by cannon fire. II was disemboweled by a cannonball. Many of II's men were immediately executed, and the rest died in prison in India. II's career as a pirate was short, but successful. He became known as one of the richest pirates in history, and that was the story of Thomas II.
Thank you, Tom, for this week's pirate profile here on the My Generation podcast. And, please do let us know what you think of all these features. You can get in touch with the Facebook page at the My Generation podcast. Let us know if you're enjoying the show. Let us know what topics and ideas you have for future episodes so we can tailor and morph this podcast to your listening pleasure. Thank you, Tom. Looking forward to sharing all of the weekly features that we have here on the show once again, this time next Thursday at 6. Now we're going back to Aid to wrap up this week's episode of the show. Just got a few more questions to ask about the direction the band's going in the future. And Aid, as we're coming out of lockdown as well, you've played a few sort of small solo pieces at the minute as well. What would you say are some of the short-term goals you have as a band?
I guess for the time being, we're just trying different content out with our audience. We're still trying to build up that kind of audience and make sure that, we're putting stuff out there during this time where people can engage and watch and enjoy. But that's what we're kind of working on at the moment. We've done a load of videos that we're about to release over the next coming months, and just testing the waters really with it all, because they don't really know where everybody else is in their own heads. It's such an unusual time for everybody.
Yeah, and I think that, in terms of planning goals, it's great to have some in such a crazy time where, things are changing every week. So I know we do pre-record these slightly far ahead, but as of, time of recording, it's the 16th. So the rules that apply here at the minute, limiting social gatherings to 6. So it's all a bit of a crazy time still. Hopefully you're living in a safe world whenever you are listening to this as well, whenever in the future. But, and also, if you're thinking about long term, what would you say some of your biggest aspirations are for the band, 5 or 10 years from now?
Long term is always our main focus, and it's purely making this a sustainable career for all involved. At the moment, we're kind of split between some of us do jobs, some of us do this full time, but it's to make this just to get on the road. That's the main thing, to travel with the music. I've travelled without the music. I've done the music without the travelling. It's now a time to combine all those passions and just hit the road basically with our music, with our songs, with our stories, and just connect with people and bring people together as well. That's our main focus, and making it a sustainable career for the future.
Amazing. Well, Aid, thank you so much for coming on the show. Really appreciated speaking to you
You're
about,
welcome.
your music creating process. I've one last question to wrap up
Sure.
with. It's the question we ask at the end of every single episode of the My Generation podcast. And it's, what do you think you've learned, Aid, by speaking about your music creating process and travel? What do you think you've learned just from talking in the last 40 minutes here on the podcast?
I think I've learned that perhaps the sound of my own voice isn't so bad. it's always what, no, it's been a great experience, and it's also, it was something I was actually quite shy to do. In fact, a friend of yours on BBC Kent with Leo, he actually brought me out my shell a little bit with all of these things, but it's just great to do them. I feel more confident, and you've made it very soothing, and it's been nice talking about myself for a little while.
Oh, thank you. Well, no, it's a pleasure to have you on the show as always, Aid. And as we move forward, we always ask about, long-term goals, because we always want to keep covering them on the podcast. So if you want to hear more about Aid's journey, it'd be lovely to bring him back on the show as, maybe a third album comes out. But, judging by, his schedule and release, who knows when that'll be? It's a mystery for all. Thank you, Aid. Well, guys, going forward on the My Generation podcast, I just wanted to tease a few more people we have coming up on the show. So one of the next episodes coming up in just 2 weeks is going to be Aaron Frith. So Aaron Frith we had on the show actually for a music creating process not too recently. He's a jazz and swing singer in Harrietsham. But he was also, we found out in that episode, and this was a bit of a bombshell for me too at the time, that he was an extra in the film 1917 and Christopher Robin. He was on set on both of those films, which is awesome. So if you want to know what it's like being a film extra, stay tuned for episode 88, because that is going to be the one for you. If you're still interested in more different musical artists and you want to hear another music creating episode, in about 5 weeks' time, we're going to be speaking with Renegade, the band that we had on very, very recently. I say recently, it feels like recent. It's not at all. It was back in January. We spoke about their music creating process, but they've taken massive strides in, the last 9 months, and we're going to be speaking to them once again and getting an update on their situation, where they're at, where they're going in the future as well, with some of their new music coming out. And the last last episode I'm going to be teasing to coming up is Abby. She is learning a language. She's learning the language of Welsh. And in the episode, we talk about what it's like learning a language which is, we're not saying is dying, but a language that is less spoken, the importance of keeping lesser known languages going, and what it's like to actually learn a new language, as she's still fairly new to it, but has made some really great strides. So if you're interested in all things language, the study and analysis of smaller languages, that is going to be the episode for you. Thank you all so much for listening to this week's episode of the show. Thank you once again, Aid, for coming on.
You're more than welcome. Thanks so much for the opportunity, and wish you the best of luck for the future, man.
Oh, thank you very much, Aid. And that is this week's episode of the show, and it is a goodbye from myself and Aid. Once again, you can tune in with us next week for the next episode of the My Generation podcast at Thursday at 6 p.m. Thank you all so much for listening, everyone. You'll be able to find Aid's links all at the top of the description. It'll be his website and his Instagram. He's extremely prevalent over there, so please go follow his Instagram. It's where so much content's coming out every day. I mean, just before we started recording, he was already still making videos and, right up until the filming of this. So I guarantee whenever you're listening to this, there's so much over there. So go follow it. Thank you all so much for listening, everyone. And we'll tune in with you all next week for the next episode of the My Generation podcast.